Good morning.
Good morning.
So the scripture passages, it's one of those weeks where there's just so much for me to speak on that I kind of get overwhelmed. And I'm like, the with Moses in the desert and the people complaining, the Romans passage, perseverance, character, hope. But it's a story of the woman at the well that keeps grabbing my attention. And the more I think about it, it is one of those profound times where we get a vision of how Jesus engaged the people in his time and what we might learn from that. We learn in life from our experiences. And if we've had a positive experience, that tends to be then something that we will try to repeat. If something goes well, if we eat a strawberry and say, wow, this is really good, then we're going to want to eat more strawberries. That positive affirmation is one of the ways in which we learn. But we also learn from negative results. We learn from the experiences in our lives that would have us not repeat that. When I was 12, I was sleeping, my bed was fairly high. It was an old-fashioned bed with posts. And I jumped out of the bed, and it was back, I was 12. I grew up in the country. I had one of those big belt buckles with the big hook. And I jumped and I landed with my heel on that hook that was right there. And it hurt a lot. So much so that to this day, I always now know where I put my pants when I go, even when I don't have that belt buckle on them, I pay attention because that experience drove into my mind, know where your pants are when you go to bed. We learn from negative experiences, things that we do not want to repeat in life. And so you see with the woman at the well, she has probably learned more from negative experiences than positive experiences. And Jesus is at the well at noon. Now, in a time, in a place where it's hot and dry, the time you don't go to the well to draw water is noon. It's wasteful. One, the water will evaporate more in the midst of the hot sun beating down on it, but also you will expend more water yourself because drawing the water and carrying it back, and see, because it was a bit of a trek from what we can gather. So no one would come to the well to draw water. And if you look at different cultures, they come in the morning, they come in the evening. That's when it makes sense to do it. No one would come at noon except someone who was avoiding everyone else. Except someone who had been shunned, who had been ridiculed, whose experience when they are at the well with the other, probably at this point mostly women, had not been very positive. And you could see in a town, it's not hard to imagine, especially growing up in a small town, if there is someone who has had a checkered past. She hasn't had one husband, she's had 5, and she's now living with someone who's not her husband. And she comes to the well, and what would she receive from the other women there? Probably not, hey, how's it going? Nice to see you. And even if they don't say anything, she's probably feeling their judgment without them having to even say a word. And so she has chosen to come at the absolute worst time to draw water so that she does not have to run into anyone. And she's coming there, and you can imagine it's like, oh, it's hot, I'm drawing here to draw water, and she gets there, and who's there but a man? And at that point, mostly it was women drawing the water, but not only is it a man, it's a Jewish man. And I've shared before that the difference between Samaritans and Jews is profound. We don't really have a good example for that. If you were an American, I could say it would be like a Republican coming and there's a Democrat there. That sort of, but more so, it's deeply entwined into their being and their identity. The Jews looked down on the Samaritans. The Samaritans did not follow the law they were supposed to, and the Samaritans responded as those who are looked down upon with their own scorn and hatred for those who are judging them. And so the animosity was thick, and so she's coming to the well so she doesn't have to receive any more scorn. so she doesn't have to be rejected, just so she can get the water and go back. And now there's a Jewish man sitting there. And then he says, "Get me a drink." She's like, "What are you doing? Like, don't you understand the social norms here? You don't ask me. You don't touch anything that a Samaritan touches because we've dirtied it. And you wouldn't drink the water that we would draw because that would be foul water for you high-born Jews. So, and you're a man and I'm a woman. We don't know. You're not supposed to ask me these things." And she goes like, "What are you doing?" And Jesus said, "Look, if you knew who I was, you'd be asking me." And she goes like, "What are you talking about?" And there's this kind of back and forth that takes place, but she stays engaged. So trying to imagine it, and all we have is the text. And from our day and age now of constantly texting on the phone, a lot gets lost in just the words. What someone says just with the words doesn't really convey necessarily, unless they throw those stupid little emojis on there. But there's no emojis in our text with the New Testament. And so all we can gather, though, is that Jesus is engaging in a way that she is staying engaged. She continues to talk with Jesus, and he says, "Look, I'd give you living water." And she goes, "Well, first off, you don't got a bucket. The well's deep." And so it's this back and forth. But you get the impression that she's starting to kind of enjoy talking with Jesus. And Jesus is engaging her, and it's going back and forth. And this is a positive experience for her. And then she says, "Well, okay, give me some living water so I don't have to keep coming to this well and draw water." There's probably this sense of humor, a bit of smiles back and forth. And then Jesus says, "Go get your husband and come back." You know those times when you've met someone and you're starting to connect, but there's something that you don't want to share about yourself, and suddenly the other person knows it? So at this point, she can be back and forth and it's okay, but now that thing that has made her an outcast in her own city, in her own place, gets brought forward by this Jewish man at the well. And imagine that's kind of like, this is fun, we're having back and forth, and no, now it's at an end. Because now he knows the absolute worst of who I am. And she doesn't try to hide it, she just says, "I have no husband." And Jesus says, "No, you've had 5, and the guy you're with now isn't your husband." And she's surprised by this. But again, the way that Jesus says it, and we have only the text, she doesn't walk away. Instead, she's amazed, because I can only imagine that there was compassion in the way that Jesus says it, because she doesn't go like, "Well, who are you to judge me?" or she doesn't storm away. She says, "You are obviously a prophet because you know this about me." And then she shoots back a question to him. She goes, "Look, the Jews said we have to do this. We think we have to, what?" And again, Jesus engages her. She feels comfortable enough to talk to this Jewish man about theology. She doesn't feel threatened or judged. She's actually throwing questions back and forth at Jesus. Jesus has created a space where this woman who goes out of her way to avoid contact with her own people suddenly feels comfortable talking to Jesus. That sense of lack of judgment around that well is amazing. And then the disciples come along, and I like the line, "And they said nothing." And then it says, "Why are you talking to her? What are you doing?" They did not say these things, because you could know that the disciples were like, "Yeah, we're going to say to Jesus, why are you talking to this Samaritan woman?" And then we get a lecture. Then Jesus is going to say, "Well," so they shut up, because at this point they know Jesus well enough. They're like, "He's doing his thing. We're not going to get involved." And the woman, again, the remarkable thing about the woman in this conversation is she who is avoiding contact is engaged by Jesus, and something changes in her. Because not only is she kind of enlivened by this communication with Jesus, that sense of her own worth, her own presence, is expanded to the point of where she now goes into the city for these people who scorn and ridicule her, who have pushed her away. And she says to them, hey, I think I may have found the Messiah. Could it be? And then she says, he told me everything about my life. And for someone who is trying to keep attention away from her, she goes there and she lays it all out in front of everyone. Like, imagine how much of a change that is from kind of skulking, hiding, going to the well at noon, to going back into the city and drawing everyone's attention. Something has changed in her where she feels not only valued, but empowered to speak and to lead others. This woman who, if she was or was not judged by her neighbors, definitely felt judged. And Jesus, by not judging her, by knowing and not using that as an excuse to push her away, to condemn her, to dismiss her, something amazing has happened. This is what we are called to do as a church. To be a place where we don't judge. To be a place where people can come in here, and even when we know all of their past, we say, welcome. This is a place where you have worth and value. And just as importantly, this is something we say to ourselves. That we are of value and worth, even as we beat ourselves up over and over and over again. I was so mad at myself yesterday. I lost my passport. Could not find it anywhere. But on the positive end, I have cleaned my office in a way I rarely ever do. And I even cleaned my bathroom drawer. I pulled out a bag full of garbage that you wouldn't even think would fit in the drawer. And I still have like a lot of stuff in the drawer. Yeah, everywhere. And Pam was tense. And I was mad that I was making Pam tense. And I just felt like I had let everyone down. And I was hard on myself. I thought I deserved it. But then we found it late last night in a suitcase in a little zip thing. And there was a sense of relief. But the thing that Pam was then telling me when I was like, oh, I'm so mad at myself. Because it was 100% my fault. It's my passport. I am responsible for my passport. I had lost it. And she says, show yourself some grace. But it's hard, isn't it? When we get mad at ourselves, when we make mistakes, when we've screwed up, we beat ourselves up and we hold it against ourselves. And we forget that at the well, we are loved and accepted as we are. Danny defied all expectations about her. She worked hard to start her own business. She was always told that 1, she didn't have the education, so she couldn't do it. 2, she was a woman. 3, she didn't look the way she was supposed to. She was always kind of gruffed and she was not who the world thought she should be, or that's how she felt. And with all the negative criticism that she received, she used it as fuel to build herself up and to drive her harder and harder and harder. So she actually got her own business going and had 10 employees and was doing well, but was at the point now where she needed to expand. She needed an investor. She had a vision. She had a plan. Everything was going to go great. She just needed an influx of money, someone that believed in her. But she knew no one believed in her. Her whole life she had worked on the assumption that people didn't believe in her, and so she would prove them wrong. Doesn't matter what my education is. Doesn't matter how I dress or how I look. Doesn't matter that I'm a woman. I can do all these things and I will prove you wrong. And she used that as her fuel. But now she had to try to sell herself. And she had gone to different investors and everyone had said no. And in the eyes of everyone, she had felt judged. And for some people, when they are judged, they kind of draw within themselves and walk away. Danny, she just struck out and she would judge the others and dismiss them and storm out of their offices. This was the last investor that she had a chance with. And so she went into his office, and right away hated it. Because it was one of those offices that was nicely well done. Like it had all the little trim, the brass lamp with the green kind of thing on the light, and all the little trim, like it, and the espresso machine for while you waited, and all of these things. And she walked in, and she lived in the back of her factory. Her office was her house, and if you walked in there, all you saw were fast food raptors and all that stuff. So she walked in there and knew that she did not belong. And she went to the name, and there was Robert Wilson. Like, what a pretentious name, Robert Wilson. And she right away despised him, and she walked into his office, and he was wearing a suit. And you know those people that look like they were born in a suit, where it's like so natural on them? He was one of those, and he had his blonde hair slicked back. He was the epitome of an evil banker. And he had a little mustache and everything. Like, she looked at him with his blonde hair, blue eyes, and she hated him. Just hated him before he'd even said anything. And she sat down, she thought, well, this is a complete waste of time. And she folded her arms, and she sat there. And Robert Wilson, he says, please call me Bob. Yeah, right, she thought. And he says, well, I've gone over your paperwork, and it looks really good. He says, I've had, as you know, an investigator kind of look around some of those things. He says, I only have one concern, and that concern is you. She knew it. She doesn't have the education. She's a woman. She doesn't look the way. And she got up and she starts pounding his table before she even knows what she's doing. And she's like, you don't think I can do this? Well, I'll prove you wrong. I don't need you. He goes, if you wouldn't mind, please. She's fuming. She sits back down. He goes, my concern is that this company needs you. You are the life and blood of this company. It is your hard work, your dedication, your insight and wisdom that has made this business grow. And we would not invest in this business without you being a part of it. And so whatever agreement we draw up, we expect you to continue to lead this business. And she's like, he goes, my concern, he says, is that without you, this business will fail. And you're not taking care of yourself. My investigator said that, you are working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. He was in your office, and he said it looks like the back dumpster of a McDonald's when you walk in there. Like, you aren't eating well, you're not taking care of yourself. And I'm worried about your health and well-being, that you'll either have a physical or a mental breakdown, and the company can't survive without you. So she goes, don't you tell me how to take care of myself. I've been taking care of myself. Don't you judge me. And she stormed out of the office. And she went back to her factory. She walked through, and all 10 of her employees could tell that she was in her mood. So they just kind of stepped away. She stormed into her office, slammed the door, and sat down at her desk. And her desk was the one place where she felt calm there. It was her own little space, and she sat down, she started to breathe, and then she started to realize that Robert Wilson, Bob, actually believed in her, and actually said that she was important and valuable and good at what she did, and his criticism was the exact same thing that her doctor had just told her like 3 weeks ago, her know-it-all doctor. And then she realized the incredible irony that she had judged him on how he looked because she had assumed that he was judging her on how she looked. We sometimes get so worried. Oh, the end of the story, she goes back the next day and gets the investment, and everything goes well. So sometimes I have the story in my head, and then I just kind of... We often start to judge people as a form of self-defense. We think people are going to look at us, think about us, respond to us in a certain way. And so in order to protect ourselves, we start to judge others. We're like, oh, they don't know me, and what do they know? And they don't do this, and they don't. we judge, and sometimes we judge people because we've been hurt. We've been in a situation where someone has said something, someone has done something, and so our judging others often doesn't come from a sense of superiority, but from a place of fear and insecurity, and from hurt. But imagine if we were able to not judge ourselves, because every time we judge someone, I don't know how else to say it, it belittles us, because we are comparing that person to us. We hold someone up, and we're right away doing this kind of us and them, who's better, who's not. And that's not what we are about. What we are about is that we are treasured, precious children of God. And if we can own that, if we can accept, not that we're perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but like Paul says, we have this grace and this acceptance through our Lord Jesus Christ. So if we can own that, then we can extend it to the people around us. And we can be like Jesus at the well and see people not, oh, they've done this or they've done that or they're this or they're that. We can just see the person as they are and meet them where they are at. And in this way, both give them a sense of worth and value, but also receive for ourselves a sense of worth and value back. It's hard. Like I say, we learn from our life, and we've learned to judge others as almost as protection. We look at someone, we think, huh. And I'm not saying that we don't use common sense. It's not like we are just kind of like, if you're driving down the road and there's someone standing there with a bloody axe and they have their thumb out, don't pick them up. But to try to see the world in a way where we see each person as valued. We see each person not based on their mistakes, not based on what condition they're in, but just see them as a beloved child of God and try to engage with them in that way. All the while being able to do it with ourselves as well. This week, the rock that I ask you to grab is a reminder not to judge. So whatever rock you get, if it's a weird looking rock, all the better. Don't judge your rock. But use it as a reminder that we are not called to judge. That the rock that we trust on is our God and our Creator. And with that is enough. That we don't have to try to find value in comparing ourselves to others, and that we can see the value and the worth in ourselves and in every single person we meet. During the hymn, I invite you to come up and to grab your rock, please.